Happy Friday, everyone. It is Futures Brizio here. I hope everybody's having a great day. 2:14 p.m., Friday, April 17th. And hope everybody's had a good week. It's kind of wrapping up here. Sorry I did not get in here yesterday or this morning. As I said, I wasn't feeling well. I'm still not 100%, but a little better today. So I just been kind of laying low. And today I really honestly didn't spend a ton of time on the charts. I had a lot of stuff going on earlier today. So I really missed a lot of the morning session. And on a Friday, that's pretty much the whole day is just the morning session. Nothing really happens in the afternoon. So, but anyways, I figured it'd be a good time to jump in and just take a quick look around and see what's happening. So, before we get started, make sure you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, questions, comments. As always, leave them down below and we will get started here. So let's just take a quick look into futures. Again, I did not really take a lot of time to look at any of this today. So we'll take a little look here. So soybean oil looks like it's starting to become range bound with the rest of the soy complex. We did come up and fill this gap right here. So um, it'll be interesting to see where the COT data takes us after we get the weekly update here on the COT. Let me take a look here. So let's see here, because this is not my template. Large specs are in red. So the large speculators are still up here in the heavily net long zone up here. So it'll be curious to see. And the commercials are still heavily net short. So we will get the update on this after the market close or weekend. This will update. So this still, from a COT standpoint, is still bullish, but a little bit of a question. It's not looking particularly bullish right now. Like I said, on the shorter time frame, we did fill this gap. So we may just enter some range trading here. So let's see how that goes. Looking at meal. Soybean meal, again, the red line are the large speculators down here. And you can see, definitely on the net long side, a little bit of a bend down last week in the number. But like I said, we'll see how that changes when we get the next update. And the commercials, of course, being the opposite because they hedge, they're heavily net short. So hasn't really been much change there. Um, Again, we have kind of like this little double top right here. This is the daily chart. You can almost call this a triple chart that goes back to this high up here in November of last year. And so clearly there's a lot of resistance from around the 330 335 area. Um, and so, you know, little unsure about this right now, but from a hyper zooming in standpoint, just looking at again the most recent swing high being this, is that it is trending down. Now, how far it goes, I don't know. We do have a little bit of a bottom range here, looking to the left. So at least in the short term, this is probably a little bit bearish, but the COT has not confirmed that. So we'll see if we get an update and if it looks like there's any distribution starting to take place by the large speculators, then that would indicate that maybe we're going to start heading down here. Soybeans has been in this range. You could see this current 4-hour candle, basically today's price action. It's trying to break out of this range, but really we would have to get a close um, probably at or above where it is right now. And the market actually is closed now. So the market has closed for the week. We closed back at the top of the range. And so that is going to be that. A little bit interesting here is from on this one, the large speculators are starting to come out of the net long area here. You can see down at the bottom, this right here. This was last week's update. Just started to bend and cleared this net long area here, and the commercial traders are starting to come out of their net short, which, of course, like I said, they're always going to be opposite of each other because they have different reasons for being in the market. But this is interesting. If we get follow through on this, then we can at least look for a short term move down And when I say short term, this is, this indicator reflects off the weekly chart. So a short term move on here could last for weeks. You can see that happened back here in December of last year. We got this bend down, and prices did go down for a few weeks before finally going back up. From a pure market, structure standpoint, we have this swing low down here on the weekly chart. So from a pure market structure and price action standpoint, we would have to break this low, I think, to really change this to a down move. So, but again, at least in the short term, we could be starting to see some weakness here in soybeans if we get follow through, and especially if this COT report continues to these large speculators begin to loosen up on their long positions. So we will see how that goes. Kind of the same story here for corn. Um, we don't need the COT on these short time frames. On corn, we're still net long here, and we still had this move that kind of broke this recent market structure and pullback. So I am still bullish on corn. Again, looking at the COT data, the large specs are pushing a little bit lower. They still are in the net long area. So again, this next update will be interesting to see. But I think overall, this this is still bullish for now, even with this big pullback. But we'll see if we are able to maintain this move up or if we're just going to roll back over. But the COT will tell us a lot. And then lastly, on on wheat, we may have broken this uptrend with this move. And again, on wheat, um, still in a net long position here, but it hasn't really done much. So again, you can't really take much from the COT data. From strictly a price action standpoint, we get these little small pullbacks and then we go up and make new highs. Well, we did break this last swing, and price is kind of sitting at it right now. So again, could be transitioning over to more of a short run. Uh, Again, one way that sometimes you can call out some of these trending markets is to put a parallel channel on it like this. When you get, it's basically like a double-sided trend line. That's really all I drew is a trend line, and just concentrating on the lower level. Have we broken that and it start to turn down? So if we clear out this low down here, we probably will turn lower. So I didn't take any grain trades today, just based on all this. Plus, like I said, I wasn't really watching too much. Just quickly rolling over to currency futures. Really interesting day. We started off pretty bullish on things like the euro and the pound going up. This is the 4-hour chart. And then you can see this afternoon we're having some tops maybe being put in and price pulling back into the ranges. So that's the euro. It's the same story on the Aussie, right? Tried to go up, make a new high, had a much smaller swing high, and then pulling back. I did have a long open on the Kiwi. I closed it at break even when I saw this setting up. As soon as I saw this kind of not, running out of steam on this 4-hour candle earlier, it ended up turning into a bear candle. I ended up closing it, and so and you can see I'm still getting alerts on the euro futures because it's just bouncing around my and on this New Zealand dollar because it's just bouncing around this alert that I have set here. I'm going to just take this off just because it's kind of annoying. And honestly, this time of day, it does not matter. So we'll see what happens with those. But are we, hitting a top here? I don't know. We'll find out next week. The dollar has been really, got hit hard this week. It is also recovering a little bit today. The DXY is up. And so let's see. The DXY is trying to recover. It did put in a new low earlier today and then has recovered back. So I don't know if we're putting in a bottom on the DXY. It's been kind of a crazy day because it seems like we might have some getting close to a resolution on the Iran deal. What's going on in Iran with the Strait of Hormuz. And, oil prices are down tremendously today. So that's probably going to hurt the Canadian dollar, though the CAD is, it had a pretty good day considering. So it's been kind of a crazy day in the markets. But again, going just strictly by market structure, it's a pretty, it was a pretty good trading opportunity right here, right? We have the stochastic RSI on the 4-hour chart pointing into the oversold area, coming out of it here and going up, and did put in new, or at least an equal high. Well, a new high, but an equal close to this one. So I mean, that was a good trade. And basically, I mean, you could just tell very easy. This is the Swiss franc. Just looking at this from a market structure standpoint, there's the 4-hour chart. Okay. Here's our swing low led to this high. So this is basically our market structure right here. Okay. So any break below here would probably send this lower, but any pullback into this area, as long as it doesn't breach these lows, would probably be a buying opportunity, right? And it's kind of the same thing on all these, although the Swiss franc is, really clear. The yen is still basically inside of this big old range right here. Every time it tries to break higher, it gets pulled back and then it gets bought up at the bottom. So it has been in range essentially since for well, this is a 4-hour chart here. This goes back to March. So since about, for about a month now, we've been range bound in this thing. So the euro, kind of the same story, right? Just making new high, higher highs, higher lows. Not as clear. The Swiss franc is really the clearest of these. Pound is pretty good too. I would say, again, even though we did make a new high. So, this is a valid swing now in the pound. So let's see what happens. But the pound and the Swiss franc are, the most obvious ones right now. And the Canadian dollar, even with oil was, last time I checked, was down like 12% on the day. It's pulled back a little bit. It's not like we're seeing a giant drop in oil here, considering how much their economy relies on oil, and how it's affected by oil prices, how its currency is affected. Hasn't really had as much impact as you would expect today. A little bit of a breather here, but that's what most of them are doing. It's not unique to the Canadian dollar. Okay. So that was it in currency futures. And then just moving on to Forex, we'll just take a look at a couple of select pairs here. So here's the pound Canadian. Okay, again, these. Let me go to the daily chart, since again that's pretty much how we look at these. We got the pound Canadian kind of coming together here. So this is definitely a watch list thing for me, when after they've been separated here for a while, now coming together to see whether this ends up being a deflection. So in other words, if these two lines right here, you see how they're coming back together? The blue line in this case is the Canadian dollar, the pound is the orange. These come together and don't cross and like just deflect away from each other, then that is an awesome buy signal on the pound Canadian. If they cross pretty definitively, one's kind of hockey stick up and one down, then that would suggest that this down move will continue. Okay, it's more of a reversal signal. But this still isn't an uptrend basically on the daily chart. I mean, we essentially have market structure somewhere in this area, generally down here. Pullback led to a new high. And so this still is in a bullish setup here, even with this kind of pullback in the pound and at least a short term rally in the Canadian dollar. Because again, if oil prices, continue to fall, I can't see the Canadian dollar staying strong. That eventually it's going to, start to weaken, and you'll see these cross pairs start to rally against it. So let's see. Yeah, let's look at CAD Switch, which is kind of the other side of that coin. CAD Swiss is, a lot less volatile, but there's really no trade here. I mean, they're both kind of pointing up right now. But this has been kind of in a range of late. Dollar Canadian. You can see that again on here, the Canadian dollar has been very strong and the US dollar has been weakening. That's still kind of playing out here, even on the daily chart. Okay, I don't really see any sign of this, dying out yet. I mean, we did come down to maybe an old support level right here today and bounced off of there. I'm not sure how much that will stick. I think it's just kind of an area of management for a lot of traders. I would expect, if these lines continue, we'll see price continue to fall away and maybe at least back down towards these lows in here, because This area where it's kind of settled in now, to me, is not great. Um, it's an old support area, but I don't know if it really has any real meaning. But that seems to be where traders were managing their trades, anyways. Switch gears a little bit. Euro Kiwi, nothing really going on here on the daily chart, both trending downward. And you can see sideways price action. Look at one more CAD pair, CAD yen. Again, the CAD, right now is still showing a lot of strength, even with oil prices down. Be curious to see if that kind of continues. Um, but the other side of this is that the yen's been pretty weak, so it has been rallying. But like I said, and we are getting a little bit of strength. You can see I have the live feed on, so the yen just jumped a little bit, but it moves up and down. Um, but like I said, I just keep coming back to this. We'll see what happens with oil prices. A couple of other ones here. Euro yen, not much going on. Swiss yen, not much going on. Again, I'm just looking at the indicator. Dollar yen, again, showing potential crossover sell right here. I'm a little hesitant with the yen because, I don't know how much strength is going to be in the yen. The Bank of Japan, I don't think he wants the yen really strong. But, this is a crossover signal here. But just be curious. I'm not going to take this right now. This pair has been pretty much in a range from back here. Even with a bullish cross right here, price did go up for a few days. And then we turned and we started having both lines head down, which kind of led us to this sideways action. Now maybe we're getting some movement here. So this is one of those ones. It's on my watch list, but if the market ends up closing in this position here, today where the dollar is still pointing down, the yen's pointing up, that might be an entry for next week, but I'm not going to take it today. I just don't trust, Friday afternoon price action, to be honest with you. But it is on my watch list. It's pretty interesting. I haven't traded the dollar yen in quite a while. Uh, Pound Swiss on the watch list, but nothing really going right now. You can see also been kind of range bound here. We did have a buy signal back here last month. Price did rally, and then you can see, with this heading down and this heading down, we just kind of entered into this range. So be curious to see if we get some kind of crossover. If the Swiss franc continues, picks up some strength again, and we get the pound heading down, that we could get into a potential short here. So that one is also on my daily watch list. Nothing there on Aussie Swiss. Dollar Swiss again continues to head down. All right, we were talking about that with the DXY. This is pretty much what we're seeing with the DXY in futures. But that's still pretty bearish looking to me. I think this has some more downside to go. Kiwi Swiss, not much going on here. It's been very kind of lackluster here for quite a while. Every time I try to get into this pair, I end up closing it because it's just not going anywhere. So, um, so and Aussie Kiwi, there was a buy here. It wasn't a real strong buy because we were already back up near these highs, and I like to see these lines really kind of come together and then deflect. But technically, this was a buy signal, and you could have been long in here. But we're back to this old high right here, so I certainly wouldn't enter this right now, based on that. And the other thing I just wanted to talk about really quick, I mentioned, again, I'm looking at the 10 period look back on this indicator. You can trade this on a weekly chart too. In fact, I went through all the pairs last night and this morning, and surprisingly, I found almost as many pairs on the weekly as I did on the daily that either had a current signal or at least to go on a watch list. Now, it could just be it's just the nature of I just happen to be looking at an active time, and because then you get times like this, for let's see how long this is. There was a buy signal here. This was back in June of last year, right? And all the way through here, there has been no signal to do anything else here. Now, it's been going up the whole time, and we do have, deflection away here, but they didn't come together. So there's, if you were using this indicator and sticking to the rules just based on the indicator, if you didn't get this trade, you would have there still would be no entry here all the way, almost a year later. But yet when I went through here, I had like euro dollar, euro Swiss, with potential setups here. Here's the euro dollar. If the euro can get some strength, this would be a nice long um in the it looks like maybe this is starting to swing back up. The dollar again is weak, but the euro hasn't been particularly strong either. Euro Swiss is a lot like the euro dollar. Um, but again, this one with the Swiss being strong is probably not the best option. If I was considering that, it would probably be the euro dollar. Dollar Canadian, we looked at on the daily chart. But if we look at it on the weekly, again, if Canadian dollar can actually start to gain some strength on the weekly chart, you can see it doesn't look as impressive. It's pretty flat. But that's a potential long setup, and it does look like this wants to go down. So I'll be curious to see how this one closes out the week. But you can see, so there's like three or so right there. Euro Canadian is pretty much the same story, right? If we can get the Canadian dollar to continue to weaken, get this euro to bend back up, that's a nice potential long setup there. And again, if the Canadian dollar begins to show any weakness with oil prices dropping, I think we could see some opportunity in CAD pairs, if that follows through. Pound US dollar, same story as basically the euro, but the pound and the euro are just not particularly strong themselves right now. So it's just, that's why the markets aren't really, doing too much here. So I think there are better options. But the point is, I'm just showing you where there's at least, watch opportunities. New Zealand dollar, US dollar, same thing. And the New Zealand dollar, after a long run down, looks like it's trying to gain some momentum. So a weekly close on this one with these two crossing each other might be a nice potential long. So we'll see how this closes out the day. I'd be more inclined to take that one. The Aussie US dollar had a nice deflection re-entry here. They didn't come together, but this is the weekly chart. But this was actually a nice signal right here at this low. And then 2 weeks it's been going up. So yeah, and you would have gotten that signal essentially on this little doji candle. So I guess the point I'm just trying to show you is that, you can do this on the weekly chart and, you could get just as many signals. Again, maybe I just am looking at this during a busy time in the market where there's a lot of transition. I don't know. But, here's the New Zealand yen. Again, looks pretty bullish. That's a pretty bullish setup right there with the yen weakening and the New Zealand dollar looking like it wants to resume going up. And dollar Swiss was the other one I wrote down. And again, if the Swiss franc can get its act back together, this will continue to fall off too. So I just wanted to point out that look, if you're, the daily chart's plenty slow enough, but if you want even less time to look at the charts, um, the weekly is an option too. And you can see that even with the weekly, I have almost as many pairs on the watch list on this weekly chart than I do on the daily chart. Now, they might not all play out and they might not all end up actually having entries, but there were a lot more than I thought, considering how long the weekly chart is. Um, it's still not a bad place to be. And again, if you're not using the live feed, you really only have to look at the chart once a week. You look at it after the close on Friday, somewhere between there and when it reopens on Sunday night or Monday, depending where you live. Um, and that's all you got to really do. You can theoretically only look at the chart once a week. Now, if you have the live feed on, you might have to look at it, once a day, anyways, because you might have an opportunity set up a little bit early. But if you're not using the live feed, you know, on a weekly chart, you'd only have to look at it once a week. You know, if you've got stuff on a watch list. Now, if you have things where, hey, I think there's a signal and I might be ready to get in, well, then you got to look at those, because then you got to look at the price action, say, okay, does it look like the price is following what the indicator is telling me? It doesn't look like a good risk to reward opportunity. So in that case, you got to look at the chart more often. But if you're just making a list of ones that like, oh, there could be a setup here coming, but it's not there yet, well, then, you probably only have to check it again at the end of the week. So So it's kind of nice. It's a nice way to, again, not spend a ton of time on the charts. But when you do get one of these signals, you can potentially hold it for a long time, Even if it's only 2 bars on a weekly chart, that's 2 weeks, That's a long time to hold a trade. Most people don't do that. So just something to keep in mind if your time is limited. And again, if anyone's interested, you want to know anything more about this indicator, leave it in the comment section. So I don't sell it, but I certainly can connect anybody interested in the person who developed it, and you can work that out with them. So I don't have an affiliate link. I don't want to be involved with that. I've always said I don't sell anything on this channel, and I'm going to hold to that. That's not, I'm not here to make money off an indicator. I paid for this indicator to be developed, and I've done really well with it. It's not foolproof, but nothing is. And I'm still trying to, figure out the best way to use it. But it's definitely an indicator I'm sticking with. All right. Stochastic RSI at the bottom here is really just for my futures trades, especially my grain markets, where this indicator up here, the currency indicator, obviously is of no value to me in the grain markets, but I can use it in currency futures because it's coded against the DXY. So anyways, that's it, guys. I'm going to leave it there. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Sorry about my voice. I said I'm still not feeling 100%. But I hope you have a great weekend. Questions, comments, leave them down below. Smash that like button on the way out. And if you have any, and subscribe to the channel. And again, I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you all next week. Thanks.